Okay, go ahead.
Okay, great. So good night, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to Globespan 24x7. I'm Shalima Mohammed from Trinidad and Tobago, and I'll be moderating our panel tonight. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to Mr. Nohar Singh for providing us with this platform. And tonight we have Mr. Lekram Rampasad. Thank you so very much for offering technical support. Ladies and gentlemen, over the next 90 minutes, we'll be having a conversation with three panelists, two from Guyana and one from Trinidad and Tobago, and I'll take this opportunity to introduce them. We have Miss Mickela Panday. She's from Trinidad and Tobago. Mickela is a former member of parliament in Trinidad and Tobago. She is a politician, she's a humanitarian, and she's the political leader of the Patriotic Front of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome, Mickela.
Thank you.
We also have Mr. Khemraj Ramjattan. He is a member of parliament, the vice president and leader of the Alliance for Change in Guyana. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We have the Honorable Lenox Shuman, who is the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly and leader of the Liberty and Justice Party in Guyana. Welcome, Mr. Shuman.
Thank you.
So we'll be chatting for about 90 minutes, and at 8 p.m. we will break for about 5 minutes to take commercials, and then we'll continue. So our conversation tonight really centers on the role of third parties on the political landscape in the Caribbean. Now, the term third party, according to Winston Ducaran just this week, Winston Ducaran is a former parliamentarian from Trinidad and Tobago. He ascribed the term third party to the media. He says that a third party is any political party which emerges to challenge two existing parties which control large segments of the population. And my first question is to Mr. Ramjattan. Mr. Ramjattan, would you agree with that definition of a third party?
Well, indeed, it is as general as it can be. A third party could be any other party apart from the two that are predominating or dominant. Like you'd have the UNC and the PN Rowley's party, PNM, and in Guyana you would have the PVP and the PNC, which is now more or less merged with some other parties to call themselves APNU. And a third party is any other party but the two dominant ones. And so, for convenience sake, I think Dr. Winston Ducaran is correct in asserting as he did.
Excellent, thank you. So I want to ask Mr. Shuman, what exactly is the objective of third parties? And can you please contextualize this based on your party?
Well, first, let me say good evening to you as colleagues on this panel, and hello and good evening to all the viewers. Good evening to Nohar and his team, and thank you for having me on the program. I think if you look at third parties historically, they formulated out of a need to be able to divert or take away from what is known as status quo. They've existed. I mean, if you look at a lot of countries, and I grew up in Canada, where you have a tremendous amount of parties. Some of them never even got one vote, but they're still parties on paper. And their intent is simply to upset status quo, that if the government starts to go awry, then you can't rely on the opposition because all you have is this flip-flop of the same. You know, people term it the same correction, the other side of the coin. So the third parties are really meant to be the third side of the coin, the ring, so that you could hold either side accountable. And I think that it is a model that has been tried many times. I think if you look at what happens in Israel, for example, you've got a tremendous amount of parties that have to coalesce to form a government at times. And that is not necessarily in a third party scenario. But I think that is where a third party comes in critically to ensure that governments uphold what their manifestos say, what they have committed to.
Excellent. So, having said that, we agree that one of the roles is to hold one of the roles of the opposition is to hold the government accountable. Now, Timothy Jonas has said that the Guyana opposition is in a terrible state of disorder. And in his view, all they do is rant and rave at this point. In Trinidad, the opposition has been sidestepped every which way by the current government. So, Mickela, how do third parties influence governance and accountability?
Well, first of all, you have to be in Parliament. I don't personally like the word third party to begin with, because I think you're calling your place in the race before you even start. I think yes, you can. How are you? You have to be in the Parliament, and the Guyanese system is different to Trinidad. In Trinidad, we still have the first past the post system. So a new party aim really is, in my view, to win the election and to become the government. That's the way that I view it. It has, because of the first past the post system, what we have had is through coalition type situation, the People's Partnership, the COP, which at that time the leader was Mr. Winston Dukaran, they were able to go into the government. But it has happened before in Trinidad, and I feel that the time is right. People are very fed up of the government, but they also see the current opposition as extremely ineffective. And I think that is why we have seen numerous parties popping up sort of before the election, because we normally see that during or just before an election, parties, they form and then they sort of die off after that, and then they form again, come together again during a general election. But we have seen lots of new parties coming up, and we'll just see how that goes. And I feel the reason for that is, especially now in Trinidad and Tobago, given that both the opposition and the current government have been in the position of power, I feel that people are willing to give someone else a chance, but it's not the easiest thing to do. And it's not the easiest thing when you're out of Parliament to sort of get yourself a platform for your voice to be heard. But that's my view. It is just, there is a political vacuum in Trinidad and Tobago now, because people are fed up, completely fed up of both the PNM and the UNC.
Right. Mr. Ramjattan, thank you, Mickela. Mr. Ramjattan,
Thank you.
In the Guyanese Parliament at this time, how many third parties are there in the government?
Say that again.
In the current Guyanese Parliament,
Yeah.
how many third parties are there in the government?
Well, there aren't a third party except for Shuman's. For third party, one can categorize that. What we have in Guyana's parliament right now is the PPP, which has on the 33 seats. The APNU AFC coalition, which is made up of two parties, that is the party that I lead, AFC, and the APNU, which is led now by Aubrey Norton, as a coalition arrangement that has 31 seats. And Shuman, who entered into a joinder arrangement with two other political parties and got one seat, which I understand is going to be distributed 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 of the 5-year period. So effectively, if you want to enunciate in that, you will have to say that the third party in the parliament right now is Shuman's party, to the extent that the AFC and the APNU had collated or coalesced in their arrangement and to win an elections. Because of the constitutional modalities here, we can't go and do a post-election alliance. We have to do elections alliance previous, just like in the 2015 arrangement, where the APNU, AFC, got 33 seats. Of course, it was literally ousted by a no confidence motion from a chap called Charan Das from our party. But whatever it is that kind of configuration that we have in our parliament now. The PPP has 33 seats in a 65 seat parliament. We have 31 with a coalition with APNU. And of course, the one comes from Shuman's party. So you can say technically that Shuman's party is that third party. Prior to 2015, however, the AFC was separate from APNU, and they had gotten 7 parliamentary seats in 2011. In 2006, we got 5 parliamentary seats. And then when we did our analysis and we found that you can't really get rid of the government of the day, that is the PPP, unless you collate, we did that in 2015 and we won the elections. Of course, in 2020, we lost it, and it was won by the PPP 33. There were lots of problems there. It was an ugly saga of our experience politically. The matter is before the court, but whatever it is, President Irfan Ali is now the president of the country. The PPP is in government with 33 seats.
Right. So thank you for shedding light on that.
Pamela,
Now, Mr. Shuman.
can I pick up on something here? There are two things. First, what Mickela said there. You know, I appreciate that there are a lot of similarities in the Guyana and Trinidad context. I think demographically, we resemble each other to a certain extent. I think in the Guyana situation, there are a lot of people who claim to be independents, who are really not interested in governing, but they're interested in seeing a change. And to the extent that that's the reality in Guyana, we have had about 10 parties that contested the previous elections. Of course, the intent was never to be government. I mean, no one really at least contest elections and say, well, I don't want to win. Everyone is running to a finish line per se. But the intent may not be to win, but to be able to capture that middle ground to produce a minority government. And I think that despite the difficulties that operate in minority governments, it is whether or not a government is willing to communicate or whether or not the opposition is willing to communicate effectively for the benefit of the people. And I strongly believe that there have been a lot of disingenuous politicians who claim that they're going up there for the people, but when they get to the reins of power, they want to do everything that they can to hold on to that instead of fighting to effect change. And I think to that extent, you've got a lot of people in Guyana who want to capture that middle ground per se, to be able to influence change, but not necessarily want to govern. We want to see things a lot more accountable. I have to correct my colleague, Khemraj here. Our seat is not being shared 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Our seat is being shared based on how many votes we have. The Liberty and Justice Party, which got the most votes in the joiner agreement, actually enjoys 2.5 years in Parliament, and ANOG, and United Guyana, enjoys 80 days. Correction, 2.5 years, 2 years, 5 months, and then TNM enjoys around 80 days or so. So it's not really 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And I thought I'd just correct him on that.
No, I stand corrected there, Shuman. Thank you very much.
And again, yes, we might look similar, and our politics might be similar, but again, we don't have the same electoral system. So it is not that easy. But of course, what we can do is that you can form coalitions with other parties, which make you, as a whole, strong enough to then fight, let us say, whoever is in government at the time. But again, it is difficult because of the first past the post system, and that is why I said that when you do form political parties, new political parties, or their coalition actually takes place, it is to get into government. Of course, that doesn't always happen, but if you are in opposition, you will be doing the job of the opposition, which is to hold the government of the day to account. But of course, when I said it is to win, sometimes what you have to do is look at the bigger parties to sort of join with them. The PNM, for example, has never had a coalition with anybody, and they're perhaps unlikely to do so. And I want to just bring up one thing. I totally agree with you when you say that people get into politics for the wrong reason. And we have seen a lot of third parties and popping up because people want power but forget why they actually are going there, or what is their vision for the country. And I think that's what people want to hear. And I think a third party could stand a chance given all that has been happening. And of course, because we're still in what has been termed a pandemic. And of course, the great role that young people are now playing in politics because of technology and social media. So a lot of things have changed. It'll be interesting to see, what happens.
Thank you, Mickela. I'm glad that you all are talking about the citizenry in the whole scheme of things. Now, we know that government is supposed to be accountable to the citizenry, but I think we have a common agreement, Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago, that government really seeks to retain power so that they can influence the distribution of the resources, and very often it goes into the pockets of financiers as well as family and friends. Is that a baseless perception, or is that really synonymous with governance? I throw it out to all of you.
Who is that too?
I want to hear my colleague Khemraj Ramjattan answer that first, because he was in the previous administration, so I think maybe.
Well, I was in all the administrations, Shuman, if you didn't know. I was in the PPP from 1992 with Dr. Chedi Jagan until I got expelled by a man called Bharat Jagdeo in 2004. I was in an anti-corruption crusade inside of the PPP, and he threw me out. I was expelled from the PPP. And then I created, with the Raphael Trotman and Sheila Holder from the WPA, Raphael from the PNC, the AFC, and we managed to win 5 seats. And in 2011, we managed to win 7 seats and bring the powerful PPP into a minority government. And then the same AFC joined up force with the APNU in the pre-coalition elections, and we won an elections. So I think Ms. Panday has gotten it right. Coalition arrangements can bring down governments. The PPP was there in government for 23 years, and its government and governance was being very corrupt. The State Department report, Transparency International, and a whole host of other international reports indicated as much. And a number of the ministers got their visas and all of that taken away because of their association with big crime in the narcotics sphere of activity. And that is why when you're a party and at least you can get some seats, it depends then how you're going to deal with the issues of policy and how you manage thereafter. Whilst in the 2011 period, if I may say so, the government of the day, the PPP then, wanted to put forward a big Amila Falls hydro project. And they got people who never knew anything about hydro project and roads and so on, like the FIP Motilals, and they paid them hundreds of millions of Ghana dollars. $5 million US was sprayed up front to go make a road to nowhere. What do you do as a third party is you vote against it. And we got a lot of cuss, especially, I being an East Indian, the PPP is largely an East Indian party. They start saying that I'm a Nimakaram to go and do things like that. And that is one of the consequences you have to pay when you now in a race-based society. And moderator, I want to tell you that in this country, 80% of the black people gonna always vote for the PNC. 80% of the East Indians gonna always vote for PPP. And you have Amerindians votes, mixed race votes, and so on, and the 2020 on both sides to capture as a third party that matters. And that is what the AFC did, winning 5 seats, 7 seats, then 11 seats in the arrangement with APNU, and now 9 seats in the arrangement with APNU. And I think we did wonderful, especially in 2015 to 2020, especially making some very big decisions. A lot of people don't understand that the Alliance for Change was also instrumental in right-sizing sugar, which was eating up the Treasury's money. They don't understand that that oil agreement, petroleum production agreement that we signed on in 2016 was one of the best decisions that could ever be made. A lot of people can cuss us down now that it's a bad decision. But when you're undecided, when you're indecisive, when you procrastinate, you're gonna fail. Guyana today is where it is because of signing of that petroleum agreement. And it was an AFC minister, Raphael Trotman, that advised cabinet, and along with other people in the geology and mines department and the energy sector and so on, that we should sign on so that we could get the oil in 5 years' time. And we started getting the oil. Today, our growth rates are in the 40% growth rate, unlike every other Caribbean country. Today, we are reaping the benefits of that agreement. Of course, the government of the opposition then, the government now, cussed us up and say, well, that was the worst agreement. Soon as they go in there, they're going to renegotiate. Soon as they go in there, they are going to reopen back sugar. We produce sugar at 32 cents per pound, and we sell for 13 cents per pound. So just like Trinidad, you had to close it down. We did exactly that. And okay, the sugar workers start calling me again and the Makaram that we did the wrong thing and so on. But the PPP then had said that they're going to reopen the sugar estate. They can't reopen it up to now. 2 years almost. So a lot of sugar workers have been made fools by the PPP government when the APNU AFC coalition in that arrangement made 2 brilliant decisions that this country in years to come will say how wonderful those decisions were.
Thank you, Mr. Ramjattan. Mr. Shuman, can we just hold for a second? At this point in time, I think we should pause for that commercial break, and when we return, we'll take a response from Mr. Shuman.
Guyana independence is in May, and Travelspan has the cheapest fares. Fly with non-stop and direct flights to Guyana on American, JetBlue, or Caribbean Airlines. Fares start from $185 one-way and $414 round-trip to Guyana. And from Guyana, one-way fares start from $251 and round-trip from $456. These are non-stop and direct flights to and from Guyana. Call Travelspan for these cheap fares. In the U.S., call 718-845-0437. In Georgetown and West Coast Demerara, call 227-1701. And in Berbice, call 337-4287. Travelspan is serving the community for over 27 years, with offices in Queens, Georgetown, Berbice, West Coast Demerara, and Trinidad. When you purchase at one office, you can reconfirm your flight at any other Travelspan office for all your convenience. Call Travelspan today and book your flights now.
Is when this wedding got done? Right now my belly burning for the 7 curry. But them fancy people just call it vegetarian food. I just call it 7 curry.
your 7 curry or vegetarian box today from allfromonesupplier.com and get free shipping throughout the US. The 2022 competition is in Cancun on July 28th to August 1st. Who is going? The Duck and the Curry going for sure, plus Raymond Ramnarain, Terry G, young upcoming dancer, and singer Ariana, Randy Reckless, and the Reckless Tassa Group. The competition for the best tasting duck is in Cancun for 2022. Friends and families, make this a reunion.
Break it down, 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 ding. Break it down, down, ding. Break it down, down, ding. Hey yo, my sweetheart, say I'm addicted to you.
Family and friends meet up in Cancun on July 28th. Enjoy your culture, your music, and your duck. For more info, call Travel-Span at 21224308865. That is 21224308865. In Canada, call 64755762000. In Trinidad, call Amirals at 6451604. And in Guyana, 2271701 or visit us at travelspan.com.
जन्म जन्म का साथ है तुम्हारा हमारा.
Bollywood on the Beach is a family and friends event with Bollywood Entertainment. July 14th to the 18th, enjoy a 5 days and 4 nights all-inclusive vacation with your family and friends and your culture. Performers from India, Pakistan, Trinidad and Guyana will be live at the resorts with your favorite Bollywood songs. In Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, stay in the family section or in the adults only section and enjoy over 12 restaurants, 11 bars, 7 pools, play areas, spas, and exclusive beach area. Your all-inclusive Bollywood on the Beach vacation is from $1,095 per person, which includes your airfare, transfer, hotel, and all you can eat and drink. Make it a family and friends reunion in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. Flights available from all U.S. cities, Canada, Trinidad, and Guyana. For rates, date, and more info, call Travel-Span at 21224308865. In Canada, call 64755762000. In Trinidad, call Amirals at 6451604. And in Guyana, 2271701 or visit us at travelspan.com.
Dave's West Indian has all of your West Indian groceries and items. They carry curry powders, pepper sauces, sodas, snacks, and much more. Dave's West Indian is the choice for West Indian items. Visit Dave's at 11808 Liberty Avenue or call 718-843-3283. And for Dave West Indian products online, visit allfromonesupplier.com for free shipping throughout the United States. Dave's West Indian is a proud sponsor of Travel-Span's Curry Duck Curry in Punta Cana.
Looking for a reliable contractor? Look no further. Call Singh's Construction today. At Singh's Construction, they can cover all your jobs, interior and exterior. We cover painting, bathrooms, kitchen, doors, windows, tiles, brick, decks, flooring, and concrete. Call Naresh Singh today for your free quote at 9172384180. That's 9172384180.
Folks, the Nest Restaurant is the place to dine for Guyanese and Caribbean dishes. It is the best restaurant in Queens. The staff is courteous, and Dave, the owner, is always there to welcome you. So for a memorable dining experience, visit the Nest Restaurant located at 12717 101 Avenue, South Richmond Hill. Go and make a reservation today or takeout. Call 718-847-4035.
Welcome back. We are here again. This is Globespan 24x7 and we are continuing the conversation. Mr. Shuman, you were going to reply to Mr. Ramjattan on this discussion about the use of resources by the government.
Well, I wasn't really going to reply to him. I was going to comment on your question and, offer my 2 cents input into it. I think your question was, when the state gets in there, or correction, the government gets in there, how are the state resources being distributed and so on and so forth. And I remember seeing a very interesting clip online that said, when you go and thank a government for building your road, it's sort of like thanking the ATM for giving you your own money. What people don't understand is that the state has a responsibility for the equal distribution of the state's wealth so that every citizen enjoys it. The issue of corruption occurs in any administration. It doesn't matter how you look at it, even some of the most evolved democracies like the Europeans, there is still a tremendous amount of corruption that is there. The upside to what they have is that they have some very strong and objective institutions that can hold governments and government officials accountable. Unfortunately, in the Caribbean, we don't enjoy that. I think we live too close. We're small, or politics have not evolved to that point as yet. But in the Guyana context, what we have seen is this tit for tat. My colleague just called out the PPP for supposedly what they had as corruption. Well, here are some of the facts also. We lived in a quasi or maybe a dictatorship for 28 years before the PPP came to power in 1992. And that was constant rigging of elections over and over and over. No one had oversight over government spending. No one could say anything. In fact, the leader of the PPP was self-exiled from fear of prosecution and persecution in the country. It is only after he came back, then there was a semblance of democracy returned to the shores of Guyana. And when that happened, then the PNC, who leads the coalition now, they were sitting on the sidelines for 23 years. So they lost that 23 years and never knowing how to govern. So they're given a golden spoon and the economy that's on the uptick and all these things, just discovered oil. And they went and signed a PSA for 2%, 2%, when the global norm, I think, is 17 upwards percent. And Mr. Ramjattan was part of that administration that signed it. Now they're sitting in opposition, along with myself, and they're crying foul that, you know what, we need to go and renegotiate. When we get back in there, we're going to do these things. We need to, hold on a sec, you had the ball in your hand and you did nothing with it. In fact, what you did was give away the ball. So that ball is not coming back to you. And on top of that, there was this massive, I think we made the Guinness Book of World Records in 2020 for the longest time to announce elections results, because the coalition in itself that Mr. Ramjattan was part of tried to rig the results of the elections, not the election in itself, tried to rig the results of the elections. I was there every single day counting votes. I was there every single day, well, not every single day, guarding ballot boxes, because Mr. Ramjattan was the head of what was then known as the Ministry of Public Security. So we don't know what ill intent was behind or were behind those eyes. I sincerely recall also that Mr. Ramjattan was caught in an audio clip when he went and told members of the discipline services that he's saying goodbye. It would appear as though they lost.
That's right.
And then he went on. Then he went on a Trinidadian TV radio program, and when the moderator asked him what happened, he said, "Well, I was simply saying goodbye because I was leaving that office and moving to the Prime Minister's office," when it stands in complete conflict of what the recording was. So in terms of corruption, currently in the previous administration, they charge members of the PPP for corruption and a whole host of things. And now the tables are turned and some of their members are being charged for corruption. So when people talk about, the coin, there's a lot of tit for tat that happens in Guyana. When you look at what Timothy Jonas said about the Parliament of Guyana and the opposition, look, my maiden speech in Parliament was to call on my colleagues to be principled in how we represent the people's issues and how we operate in Parliament. And all of those words fell on deaf ears. What we had are members of the opposition, my colleagues in the opposition, who caused Parliament.
Excuse me 1 second.
Yeah.
Mr. Ramjattan, would you mind muting your mic?
I am trying now to get on back again.
No, just mute your mic for a second, please.
Yeah, you see me?
We're not seeing you, but would you mind muting your mic, please?
So he
Terrific.
left. He'll be
Thank
back
you.
on. He'll log on back. But what I'm getting
Sorry,
at
Mr.
Perfect.
is that they've in last year, I think it was last year, they caused Parliament to descend into chaos. When before the budget was passed, they started blowing whistles, completely in violation of the standing orders. I'm not saying that the government is immune from that, because the government did the very same thing when they were in opposition. They took placards and all these things completely in contravention of the standing orders of Parliament. And most recently, when we had the Natural Resource Fund bill that was tabled, it descended into chaos in Parliament, where the opposition tried to steal the mace out of Parliament. I think 5 of their parliamentary members were suspended from the sitting. Well, they were sanctioned by the Privileged Committee for that behavior. So Timothy Jonas is right. I sit there every single time and I try to call my colleagues out and say, look, we've got parliamentary standing orders. We are supposed to be the creme de la creme of society in how we represent the people's interests, in how we conduct ourselves in Parliament. The unfortunate thing is, I don't see that in my colleagues when I sit there. One of my colleagues in Parliament threatened me in the chambers. While we're granted parliamentary immunity, I think that is confined to our language and what we say, because you can't have a healthy debate without freedom of speech per se. But one of the opposition members, my colleagues in opposition, threatened me in Parliament. It was reported to the police, the speaker, the clerk, both chief whips, and not a single thing was done to that parliamentarian. Not even an apology to me. So that shows that I'd say the caliber of people who are in Parliament that are sitting in the opposition benches. And then on the government side, they've got their whole host of issues. And I don't sit in their benches, I see it. And I'm not open to commenting to that, because I want to ensure that we don't lose the essence of the importance of third parties in parliamentary politics.
Right, so that brings me to an important question. Incumbent parties control the public purse, and in election campaigns, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is in Guyana, Trinidad, and generally in all territories, they use public funds to fund the election campaigns once they're in government. So let me ask each of you, and I'll start with Mickela. Do you see a need to change that? And if yes, how?
Well, first of all, campaign financing only comes up during the election time, and such a short period before the election that nothing can be done. So during the last election, for example, all third parties, and quite a number, I think it's about 50-something parties that actually contested the last election. And I think all parties or their leaders, what had happened was the Parliament, the government through the Parliament, sent you an email and they said, listen, if you have any suggestions on this legislation, etc. Nothing ever happened. They said that they couldn't have any consultation because the election was coming up, and we've never heard anything about it. Now, you say that they use public funds. The first thing they'll say is, no, we don't, and prove it. We actually have the Representation of the People's Act, which gives a limit on how much you could spend. And forgive me, I think it's something like $25,000 or some kind of thing like that. A very, very, very minuscule amount. But yeah, again, there's no kind of accountability. So if you spend more, who exactly is going to hold you account for doing that? You have the two big parties, and this is where a newer party finds themselves, in such a difficult position. You have parties spending $300 million. I know for a fact one party spent $300 million. To think what they could have done for people with that amount of money instead of wasting it on propaganda and all these kinds of things. But yeah, that's what happens. And again, like I say, if there is legislation, there must be, as with everything else, not just legislation for legislation's sake. How is it going to actually be enforced, and by whom? It can't be by the same government that is spending the funds. It is a really, really, really difficult situation. I mean, imagine you have a law it's representation of the people's act. A law that both the government and the opposition are openly breaching, and no one can do or will do anything about it. So that is one problem, and I've had it with our party, the Patriotic Front, as well. You are really competing with some very, very, very deep pockets. If you try, for example, to not go down the same path that others have done in terms of financiers, and we've been told that they're really the ones that run the country, and decisions and policy is made in their favor. If you try to do it differently, it becomes even more difficult, as we have been experiencing. But keep your eye on the eye of the bird, and hopefully get there. I mean, people think because you have social media that social media is free, to a certain extent, but that in itself does help quite a bit. There's many ways to get your message out to a huge amount of people, in ways that you perhaps weren't able to do before. But I would like ultimately to see, not when parties are in opposition, but when you are in government, to entertain, to have consultation with the different parties and the stakeholders to talk about campaign financing. My worry is, how exactly is it going to be enforced? And as we love to do in Trinidad, if somebody has to go to court or something, or is charged for that, that will take another 5 years. They'll be out of government before anything even happens. So it's a really, really difficult one. And I guess it happens in Guyana as well.
So let's hear from Mr. Ramjattan. What is the situation with...
There are lots of laws that were made since in the 1950s and 60s in that Representation of People Act. We have something like that too. And I think it is $10,000 is what you got to spend in a campaign, at least for a candidate. Now, 10,000 Guyana dollars is no value at all. So the laws have to be changed. The government, when they get into government, they simply shy away from dealing with that. We made a law that a person must only serve 2 terms as president and no more. But you can get a smart aleck like Mr. Jagdeo, who is serving a 3rd term by just putting up an Irfan Ali there. And that is what you can do, the bypasses. I'm a lawyer by profession. And these bypasses can be so, easily done. And that is why myself and Sheila Holder, we went to Vancouver in the 2008 period. And we were given some lectures on campaign financing. Came down here, Sheila made a motion to the parliament about campaign financing. It was not passed. That was then. And it was not passed by both of those big parties then. That was the APNU, PNC then, and the PBP. They didn't want it. But the whole arrangement is that, sometimes when you get into opposition, you want to talk about these things. When you're in government, you say, well, fine, we got to look after this and we got to look after that. It is true. The political calculus of decision-making in relation to matters that might affect vested interest is a totally different ballgame and a kettle of fish. And so we have to appreciate that. And that is why when we did this thing, and look, I am just reading from Selwyn Ryan. I think he's Trinidadian. Westminster Experience in the Caribbean, winner takes all. He says one of the most important things that we got to do to ensure that there is further democratization is cutting the elitism of certain political leaders. And that is what we have in the PBB. You got the Jagans, now you got the Jagdeos. And the Jagdeo could hit out people like Ramjattan, call them Nimakaram, and get the support of the people at the bottom there when you call them Nimakaram. And he said this: we must limit the number of consecutive terms that a given political leader can remain in power, as is the case in US and Latin America. And then he goes on to give his rationale. We adopted this as a constitutional reform. It is now in our constitution. And of course, Mr. Jagdeo, when he was president, carried the matter to the CCJ for a ruling that denying me a third term, like some Putin, is going to be something that is unconstitutional. The CCJ ruled that it is very much constitutional. You only got 2 terms and no more. But what he did was a bypass. He didn't have the normal democratic elections that Cherry Jagan used to allow when the PPP was run by Cherry Jagan. He set up this fella, put him, and today he controls oil, he controls the NIS, he controls sugar. It's but a third term. You generally go after that kind of constitutional reform he had and do like Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. You move off the scene. But he does not want to do that. And that is one of the problems we have here in Guyana, where an elitism is now structured into the norms of that political party. And apparently, we in the Caribbean do not see it. There is a girl, a lady professor recently that was calling this thing the kingification in a constitutional law program that I was in. And it is important that we do not allow that. Why do we have it? It is because it lessens this elitism. And because he was president for 2 terms, 2.5 terms, because he took a half term from Janet Jagan, he becomes all powerful. He knows all the big players. He knows all the lobbyists from Trinidad, the lobbyists from Barbados. He knows all of these people. And he knows, by virtue of that connection, can do a lot of things. He also knows British, what the thing called? Cambridge Analytica, which could then do in very previous methods with your what do you call it? Your Facebook. All manner of nastiness coming in that black people can't run oil money. Don't ever give them the oil money. All of that came here. Just like how you had something like that with Cambridge Analytica in Trinidad. It is a dark side of democracy that is affected by these players that are all powerful, that knows all these contacts, and then utilize all these media. And then they play their racial games there. And we don't even know. We don't even know.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ramjattan. So, Mr. Shuman.
Let me pick up on something there. You know, Khemraj mentioned some very interesting points about the public purse per se, and I think that's where the discussion started about, you know, access to the public purse and its utilization. I don't think that the majority of the government or the country really disagreed with, you know, a responsibility to ensure that we are not continuously subsidizing sugar. I think the manner in which it was done was, it seemed very heartless, if I were to put it that way. You know, you simply shut down an industry without finding alternative livelihoods for over 7,000 people. You completely decimate the sugar industry just because you want to save a dollar, but you have no concern about the average man or woman and how their families will survive. And that is the issue that the previous administration did. No one really disagreed that sugar needed to be reformed, but you did not look for alternative livelihoods for them in terms of how do we transform this industry, how do we diversify it, and all of these things. It's just, look, here's your last pay slip, you're done. And after that, the sugar workers had to go after the government for what they were legally entitled to, which was severance. And they only paid them half, so they had to then take the government, the AP and UAFC government, to court just to get what they were legally entitled to get. So once again, it is not that sugar did not need to be reformed. It is the manner in which it was done. The second thing is you talk about public purse and public spending and all of these things. While you're putting 7,000 people out of work, what the previous administration did was went into Parliament and gave themselves a 50% salary raise. You're already entitled to a fairly decent parliamentary salary. You're entitled to your ministerial pay. You're entitled to a security, a driver, all these things. You're putting 7,000 people out of work, and then you're going into Parliament because you have a majority, and you're raising your pay by 50%. What does that tell the people that you would have just put on the breadline? it says that you don't care about the suffering of the man on the street or the woman on the street. And that is the issue that we have with this majoritarian rule per se.
I don't see that the PPP has
if you look at the coalition formula in itself, right? To bring back the essence of what coalition really means is that the APNU AFC government had a fantastic opportunity to sit down, whether or not the PPP wanted to or not. That is not, what we're here to discuss, and they could speak for themselves. But they had an opportunity to bring a whole lot of reforms to Parliament, which they did not. They could have tabled constitutional reform and now place it in the hands of the PPP and say, you never showed up. But instead, when the report was written, the then Prime Minister, Moses Nagamutu, took that parliamentary reform report and hid it. Didn't bring it to Parliament. Now,
Madam Moderator, I would need to respond a lot to what he's saying.
Careful.
Okay, may I interject?
Let me finish this one point. If we truly care about the role that I would say third parties bring and the richness that they bring to Parliament, I think that if you look at coalition, they had an opportunity to reform the Constitution to permit post-electoral coalition, which would have transformed the political landscape in Guyana, but they failed to do that. That was a golden opportunity missed.
Gentlemen, I must say, this is a very rich conversation and I am learning so much more about Guyanese politics.
Look, I want to just rebut what he's saying about
Mr. Ramjattan, just a moment, please. I just want us to remember that what we want to talk about here is the role of the third party. The third party. And so my question now is, Mr. Shuman, as a third party, can you change this? Do you have influence where you are at right now? Can you change, and how will you change this thing about campaign financing?
All right. So I don't want to pick up on the previous one because I didn't really get a chance to mature my point about, campaign financing and all these things. The state, the government enjoys, I'd say, carte blanche use of the public's purse. And you're right. They go to the public and they can roll out a tremendous amount of programs, visit every family, every household, and say, well, we're not using it for campaigning. Campaign starts in every democratic society. Campaign starts immediately after a winner is declared. That's where the campaign starts again. Whether we like to believe that or not, that is the reality. Where I sit in Parliament, I don't have the kind of political clout, save for conversations with the reasonable-minded parliamentarians to find out how we could have quiet conversations about that. The unfortunate thing is that I don't have what I would say reasonable colleagues within the opposition that wants to advance that conversation. There's a lot of political grandstanding, a lot of political posturing, instead of once again sitting there and looking at things from a principled position and saying, this is what we can and should do for the people. Instead, everyone is sitting there and saying, well, this is what I'm going to do because it makes me better politically. It gives me a lot more visibility. And I think that, where I started off this discussion is we need reasonable people to become politicians, and not because they want to grow into a political dynasty, but because they have a genuine interest in instituting change for the people, not to displace thousands of people and you come back, you give yourself a 50% raise. That doesn't show that you care about the people.
So let me ask this question. Does your party have superior knowledge about the needs of the citizenry?
I would not say that we have superior knowledge, and I think all of us share the same information. I mean, Khemraj and his party and the PPP, they have a lot more political history, a lot more political experience, a lot more reach from their financiers, and even their activities. If I were to be so bold, and I wouldn't accuse anyone, their activities while they were in government, I made to understand that a lot of them may not even have to work for the rest of their lives. So they're flush with cash. For us, we don't have the kind of resources to go out and do the groundwork to get the kind of data. But people are coming to us every single day and saying, look, these things are affecting me. So we may not have the depth of history and institutional knowledge and purse that Khemraj and the PPP, the government may have, but we are still exposed to the same environment. We still have conversations with relatively the same people. And Guyana, for all intents and purposes, we're a small country. 750,000, we've got 65 parliamentarians, 10 regions, and when you take that 750 and you start bringing it down, the political circle in itself is very small. If you were to go to some of these social events, fundraisers for each political party, you will see the same faces. You go from the Marriott's to Pegasus to wherever for some of these functions. It's the same set of people you're meeting all over the place. So that shows how small the political society is in Guyana. And not only political, I'd say the elite group, as Khemraj termed it earlier.
Moderator.
Right. Mickela, let's bring it to Trinidad and Tobago. Do you think your party has superior knowledge about the needs of the citizenry?
Yes.
Go ahead, let me hear.
What else can I say? And I tell you why. Because for a very long time in Trinidad, there has been a complete disconnect between the government and the people. And perhaps it happens because people have been there for quite a long time, and we have a similar situation of people refusing to leave, even when their own party members are saying, listen, it's time to go. It turns into almost the same thing of cult of personality. But you have to be in touch with people. You have to be able to be open to meeting people. You have to have an open door policy. Now people don't even have to come and see you. They reach out to you. I'm not just saying by telephone. You have Facebook, you have Instagram, you have Twitter, and all these Gmail, all these different things. And yes, what we have been doing instead of mudslinging and making noise is going out there and meeting real everyday people and finding out what it is the problems are. Because in Trinidad, we too are a small country, but sometimes they're national issues, but they're also constituency issues, which differ throughout the country. How are you ever going to know that if you sit in a boardroom or in an office? You're going to have to, yes, people can come to you and they do reach out to you, but I think it goes hand in hand with you also being able to go out, meet with people, find out what's happening, because I think that ultimately will determine what your policy is going to be. You may say, I have 10 things when I get into government I want to do, realize that the treasury is probably empty and you only have 5. How are you going to prioritize what is important? And what I have realized, yes, Trinidad has money. We have the same problems: waste, corruption, and mismanagement, and that's been the biggest problem from day one. But you have to meet and be accessible to people, and that's what I think is missing. You don't see your councillors in Trinidad. We know that. MPs are supposed to have a day in which you can go to their office and speak with them. You're lucky if that ever happens. And they're absolutely untouchable. So I've seen that in Trinidad. We have been out on the ground trying to find out what's happening. And I was going to say to you, I think in Trinidad, you have to begin, and it's embarrassing, but the truth be told, with the basic necessities of life. After all these billions of dollars, there are people in Trinidad and Tobago who don't have water. There are people in Trinidad and Tobago, many people who have lost their jobs in the pandemic, which is no fault of any government. Many people in Trinidad and Tobago now have to choose between eating and paying rent. The basic necessities of life: food, shelter, clothing. I think we have to look at that. We have a pitch lake and we have some of the most horrific roads. The roads are terrible, and you will find throughout the constituencies, especially now, that's what it is. You still, I mean, it's really still struggling for water. There are people without electricity, really still basic necessities. So yeah, I think the only way that you can know is not by reading a book, is that you have to get out there and make yourself accessible to people, and they will come. And trust me, people who just want to be heard. They don't necessarily think you can fix everything, but they want to feel that somebody is there that's listening to their problems. And I think that we are doing that.
Thank you. So, Mr. Ramjattan, let me ask you this. Each party has its own support base. You kind of alluded to that previously. In Trinidad and Tobago and in Guyana, it's predominantly along ethnic lines, right? Who supports or who constitutes the support base of your particular party?
Well, it is a multiracial element. We have lots of Amerindian supporters. We have lots of East Indian supporters and Afro-Guyanese supporters. But they come from that minuscule or 20%, like I told you. And the 20% of the Indo-Guyanese who sometimes are vexed with how the PPP as an Indian government is running the country. And from the 20% from the Afro-Guyanese who felt bad that the Afro-Guyanese government wasn't doing a proper job of it. And so we also have from the mixed race. It is that combination that has created in the AFC a very formidable force in Guyana's politics. A formidable force to the extent that could make the decisions, which is being criticized by Shuman, but which, when we went down to our support base had people not only who were sugar workers, but people who are nurses, teachers, and all of that. And when we went into government and we had to bail out sugar at $1 billion Guyana dollars per month for 36 months, we were getting lash now from the nurses and the teachers. So what happened to us? Sugar was not bringing in a profit like it used to bring in before. And so we had to right size. Please don't feel that we closed down the industry. We closed down 3 factories and estates. And we allowed 3 to run: Albion, Blairmont, and Iflut. So I want to correct my friend. In the course of that, we had to terminate sugar workers' job, just like you did inside of Trinidad and Tobago. You closed down the estate because it was unprofitable, and you paid a severance payment. They wanted the severance payment in the first year. We said we're going to pay half the first year and half the second year. I understand in Trinidad, you paid the severance payment in about 7 years after you closed down the industry. We were forced now to pay in 1 year, and we did it. And I want to tell you something about that salary. We were the poorest paid ministers in the entire Caribbean. And what our finance minister did was to go around to Trinidad, to Barbados, and all of those, and then decided what is a good salary for our ministers. And he decided that it will be on par with Trinidad. And that is what came to Guyana. Now, we were being paid about $1,000 a month, $250,000 take home. And what we decided was that was, embarrassingly low. Yes, we had to make decisions. And when we now went around the Caribbean and understand what ministers get and their benefits and all of that, we then got a committee that did it, and we did it. By the way, the same thing about the sugar, when they said they're going to restore back the factories as soon as they win the elections, they said they're going to bring down back the salary, the PPP Jagdeo and your finale. They have not. As a matter of fact, every time they increased the last time they increased the public servant salary by 7%, they increased their ministerial salary by 7%. Whereas in the 5-year, when we increased ours, we never increased it whatever. And we increased salary to almost 100% for the public servants, not 7%. So look, as I said, we are not here to start this battle to internal politics. It is what third parties bring. Now, I want to bring back the argument there. Third parties got to prove that they're a formidable force too. You just don't go and you run and you get one seat. You have to do something that can make you viable and afraid of by the major parties that are around. So when we got the 5 seat, they were all scared. When we got the 7 seat and brought down the PPP into a minority status, blocking their very bad policies, supporting their very good policies, we mattered. And that is why the people got to like us to the extent that they urged us, because in our constitution, like in Trinidad, you can't have a coalition post-elections. We had to merge. And when we merged, we won in elections. As I said, when you are in government now, you have to know what is for the future generation, because as was being said by Mr. Panday, you talk to the people. When you tell them that Exxon now come and say that they got so much oil, too much of oil, we then had to make a decision. What do we do? Other people, typical Caribbean people, they always say we short change ourselves. You want to sell a car there, you put up $1 million for the car, you ain't get the price, you sell it for $500,000. Somebody can say, man, if I didn't know, I would have given you $700,000. But whatever it is, we were in government. We had to make that decision. And it is not 2% royalty alone. We also had a profit share, and that was not mentioned by Shuman. The profit share is 50% profit share when the people pay off for all their investments. So right now we are getting 12.5% profit. For the first 2 years, we have gotten $607 million. Had we not signed that agreement, we would never have gotten $607 million US. This year, we are going to touch almost $1 billion US. And in 2025, we might start getting 4 or 5 billion US dollars, because by 2025, we might have 750,000 barrels of oil per day. So when you start to procrastinate, when you start and you know that sugar is in a bad state, no profit in coming in from sugar, we had to debate this thing. Plus, I want to tell the Trinidadians here, we had a small boat that was investigating for oil off the coast there. And then Venezuelans come and take away the blasted boat. Yes, we then had to get a very powerful Exxon that is going to be supported by America, which geopolitically stopped the Venezuelans from ever coming close to Guyana. They back off now. That is an invaluable, a valuable asset in the arrangement. And so people could talk silly things like they got some ministers now, they don't have to walk and so on. You know, this kind of thing is very silly. Exxon is a big American company. It lives with certain laws. I mean, they got other companies from other countries that's come in and do all kinds of things. We had to make the decision for geopolitical reasons to get a big company here that will stop Venezuela wanting to march forward. Venezuela put up a line there that all the marine waters belong to Venezuela. We stopped that by having ExxonMobil come in. Plus, we don't have the kind of resources to go 4 miles deep, 3 miles of water and 1 mile under the ground to bring that oil up. And there it is, a poor country. We had to make the decision. That is what I'm talking about. In government, when you have to make these decisions, you make them for the future generations. But anybody could come here and say, but y'all could get a 5% royalty. Well, if the big players don't want us to get that, we can't get that. They will just walk away. As a matter of fact, Exxon said, well, if you don't want it, so they're going to walk away. And what do? Then the same Shuman would cuss us why y'all didn't sign on the bloody agreement.
Mr. Ramjattan, let me just switch it up a little bit here. I want to bring the conversation into inclusive governance.
Good, yeah.
Are you open, given all that you've said, are you open to offering expert advice to the government in the interest of the citizenry?
Absolutely, and that is what I take it as a personal endeavor in my political career to do that.
I was in the PPP government from 92 to 2004. And that is what I was doing in its central committee. That is what I did at its national conferences. But there were some elite gangs there that did not want to hear about inclusive governance. That is why when in government for the last 5 years, 2015 to 20, when we did our natural resource fund, we made sure, I was a chief subscriber to the point, we must have a 22-man transparency committee of that natural resource fund. Do you know what the present government has done? Deleted the 22-man civil committee. It's a civil society that we wanted to build to manage our monies, the oil monies. And we said that the oil monies is going to be separate from the consolidated fund. So that will be managed by a civil sector, labor, business, youth, and all of them. 22 people, you know. They deleted that and they brought back a 5-man committee that is made up exclusively of people that the president wants. And so that is the good governance and the inclusive governance that we want. At every major national event, we invited the PPP there. Today, they do not invite us to any of their events. National events I'm talking about, not a party event, national events. We gave them a member of the opposition, one member for each board or commission, a PPP member. You know that in the 5 years, they never took it up. And today, they are not making any of the opposition members being a member of the board. That is inclusive governance. And so there's a big distinction between what we did in our 5 years and what happened in the previous 23 as against what happened this 2 years almost that the PPP is in, you know. And so it is important. I have spoken to my president, Irfan Ali, at a reception for the American Independence Day celebrations. And I indicated to him, but you know, this fella, Jack, there was the stopper. He indicated that, hold on, you got to talk to them when certain conditions, they got to respect you and this and that, and they got to call, they got to probably put away that elections petition and so on. No, when you are president and you're president, the opposition leader should speak to the president and don't go through any gates to get to the president. And so it is important that in our inclusive governance, which is part of our constitution, by the way, in our Guyana's constitution, we have inclusive governance there as part of the principles and foundations of our political system. It was based on the India model and some other countries' model, not the Trinidadian model. But this is what we have. And today it is all being blocked. And so I would answer your question. Certainly, we have to be a responsible opposition. And that responsibility will reside in showing maturity, showing tolerance for the government also, because the government also being in the executive branch must be allowed to have a space for its policies because it is the government. And I have spoken to my opposition people like that. And that is one of the reasons too, and Shuman should know this, that when that day you had problems in the parliament, I was not part of that. You know that. And so it is important that you've got leadership that is going to hold the government to account, but also be responsible in their behavior and also be tolerant to at least an executive branch that has sometimes its own way, but you still got to bang at their doors. Please be more inclusive. Please be more inclusive. And that is what we are doing in the Alliance for Change.
Great, thank you. So Mr. Shuman, let me ask you, in your position, do you think you can indeed offer expert advice to the government that they will accept? Have you done that?
Yes, absolutely. And that is what I continue to do. I mean, despite the fact that we are not in public battles all the time, you know, my humble view is that in this political environment, one cannot dominate the limelight. We have to understand we're not here to play politics. We're here to make a difference for the people. And I've always taken that position. It is the people first. And my actions, if it is short-lived, if I never contest again and I would have made a difference for a few people, then I'm happy with that. I'm not here to fight the political grandstanding battles and all of these things. I want to pick up on a few things, and I'm sorry that maybe your Trinidadian viewers may not find this bacchanalish, or maybe they're finding it that way. Khemraj talks about signing PSAs. Yet when they signed the PSA, the partner sharing agreement with Exxon, they were given a signing bonus. To date, we have no idea what happened to that signing bonus.
It's in the Bank of Guyana.
I am telling you that I don't.
Khemraj,
I sit in Parliament.
Okay, just one at a time, please.
I sit in Parliament, and I have no idea where that money is.
Stole it?
So I have not seen anything that says here is the money. And not only that, when that signing bonus came out, it was not disclosed to the public. The public had to go through this long process just to have that PSA in the public domain so we could scrutinize it. So while Khemraj is talking about inclusive governance, they never included anyone in the consultative process for the PSA. They look at it as a sense of urgency. I don't know if the sense of urgency was to get to that signing bonus so that, or whatever else was behind it. I think in terms of influencing policies, it is important, once again, that we look at the reasons why we are contesting for politics. We see a need, the needs are for the people and by the people. And I think it is important that we never lose sight of some of those things. Now, what Mickela had mentioned, about the political landscape in Trinidad and the infrastructural decay and all these things. I say this with apologetically, but yet with due respect to all of you, that I hope that Guyana does not descend to that level. You've had oil for 100 years, and Trinidad is in that state. Guyana just found oil. The government has taken up this aggressive agenda of developing the infrastructure, and I hope that in 100 years, we don't sit there and reflect and say that we have subscribed to mediocre work for 100 years. If that is the case, then we're most definitely on the wrong path. But Shalima, I also want to say this. Right now, I am the government advisor on aviation. And I think that these are some of the things that we have to be very, very careful of, right? The government thought that I would have been, well, in my time, I lived in Canada for close to 30 years. I'm an airline pilot by profession. And I left that, I renounced my Canadian citizenship to come back to Guyana. And I want to ensure that that word is very clear. I renounced my citizenship to come back to Guyana because that is what the Constitution of Guyana demands. Yet you've had the APNU AFC, the PNC, and the PPP who sat in breach of that Constitution for decades, and not a single word of it until they were ousted via a no confidence motion. Added to that, I don't want to sound like I'm apologizing for the PPP because they've got their own agenda, but I want to say things from a principled position. I was what we called the National Two Shows Council, which is all of the indigenous chiefs in Guyana formulate a council called the National Two Shows Council. I was the vice chairman of that council, basically the deputy grand chief of the country. When the president, David Granger at the time, had put out, because by the Constitution, you have to have an agreement for the chairman of the Elections Commission. That was part of the Carter-Price formula to sort of mull over electoral difficulties in Guyana. When he put out that request, we were consulted on who that candidate should be for the chair of the Elections Commission. Yet David Granger went and unilaterally appointed a candidate in violation of the Constitution. Now, if someone is to come there and you're controlling this massive machinery that deals directly, hands-on, with the democratic institution, the guardian of democracy per se, that institution that should be objective, and they unilaterally appoint someone to head that institution, then that obviously puts me at a very uncomfortable position that I don't want to engage if this is the way you're going to run roughshod over the Constitution. And they continue to defend that even after the no confidence motion was passed. I think I'll correct myself. It went to the CCJ. The CCJ said that the unilateral appointment cannot stand. It was in violation of the Constitution. So they had to go and find another elections commission, which they both agreed upon in a fairly short term. But also, after the no confidence motion, the then administration stayed in office for close to another year. And the Constitution says that elections are due 90 days after no confidence motion. So they kept going and going and going. And the NRF bill, which Khemraj talks about, was passed when they were in breach of the Constitution. So by virtue of that, the law has no effect. You're in violation of the Constitution, so how do you bring it there? So to influence policy from a third-party position, there must be some genuine interest on both sides to have that conversation. And I will tell you that, look, when Khemraj was the Minister of Public Security, I went to him and I said, and I don't know if you'll remember this, but it was in Parliament when I said, Minister, I think that what this country needs to address the sensitivity issues, because there are a lot of sensitivity issues in the country. I said, what you need to do is to develop an indigenous arm in the police force to address indigenous issues, because it continuously breeds this racial tension per se. There are a lot of language sensitivities, traditional cultural sensitivities, and Khemraj said, I don't see that will ever happen. That's not
true. Come on.
Maybe not verbatim, and I will not say verbatim, but
this is not what we're here
shot me down in Parliament for putting.
So let me just one moment, please. We have just about 5 minutes left. I would love to take this conversation into another hour, and I'm sure our two gentlemen will want to do that as well.
Let me wrap up my point.
We have 5 minutes. I just want your closing comments here, and I like where you've gone with Constitution. If you could please tell me, as a third party, the leader of a third party, do you see the need for constitutional change? In just 1 minute, can you please tell me, do you see the need for constitutional change, and what are 2 changes you would make?
Well, I can take that. I would want to see.
Just a moment, Mr. Ramjattan. Just a moment, Mr. Ramjattan.
Well, first, since it's the closing remarks, let me say thank you to you, Shalima, and you, Mickela. And I would welcome you guys to come and join us in Guyana sometime to see this bacchanal. I want to thank Khemraj and both of you for being on the show, Nohar, all the viewers. I see that there is desperate need for constitutional reform. The list is long. It is something that we have started, at least both parties, all parties have preached constitutional reform. I think one of the things that potentially needs to be addressed is the executive presidency. And if you look at the pre and post-electoral coalition, I could list a whole host of things. You would also want to revise the structure of the Guyana Elections Commission. I think those are 3 very critical ones. When we get those right, I think the rest will obviously come by way of dialogue.
Right. Thank you very much. Mr. Ramjattan, I saw you shaking your head affirmatively.
I agree with him totally.
With him?
It is the powers of the presidency in Guyana and the fact that it could be bypassed by past president like Jagdeo and so on, all of that. 2 terms mean 2 terms and you must go. You can't come back as a vice president. It is important. And also the powers of the presidency must be cut down plenty. There's executive functions and all of that. The fact that the judiciary depends on his appointments and a number of things. And the other one is the elections commission being reformed. I prefer the Jamaican model where they don't have that political input from the 3 major, the 3 on one side being the government party and the 3 on the other side from the opposition party. We must have civil society in that elections, because that is where that 5-month period came in to create that ugly saga. It was the elections commission one way or the other.
Right. Thank you. Mickela, in Trinidad and Tobago, the need for constitutional change.
Absolutely, absolutely. My father, ironically, has been leading that charge for quite some time now, and it is terribly unfortunate that the last government, the People's Partnership, did have a constitutional majority. They had 29 seats, and the opposition had 12. So they could have brought about so much change, and the opposition didn't even have to come to Parliament. So it is very unfortunate that that didn't happen. I also just wanted briefly to say that only when you're in opposition, people talk about constitutional change. Once you get into government, you are very happy with the status quo because it suits you. It promotes tribal voting, and tribal voting suits you. Electoral reform is extremely important. And what I would like to see, and just like my colleagues, there's so many things, but I want to just put it under the umbrella of parliamentary accountability. Because under this system, you can just come and do whatever you want, and the opposition really doesn't have that much of a say. They can't hold them accountable. It's a talk shop. And beyond that, I think that governments have to be more accountable, and we can do that through an updated constitution that is relevant to the time that we live in. And I think in order to do that, what we need is genuine consultation about constitutional reform, and not just popping up here and there and pretending that you're doing something. We did talk about things about 2 terms, and so there's numerous things. But I think, again, only when you're in opposition. I have not seen any attempts by the government now to do anything. The last government, like I say, we've only probably had that opportunity 3 times in our country's history, if even, if so much. And it was a wasted opportunity. So yes, constitutional reform is important because we're living with an outdated constitution.
Excellent. That's an excellent point on which to bring this to a close. I want to thank you all very much, Mr. Lenox Shuman, Mr. Khemraj Ramjattan, Ms. Mickela Panday. It's been a very, very enriching conversation, and I thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please
You're welcome.
come and see us in Guyana sometime when you have time.
Oh, we would love to.
You know how
I
to.
definitely would.
You know how to get a hold of us.
Thank you.
We actually have a Commonwealth Parliamentary Association conference on the 10th and 11th. Khemraj, are you going to be there?
Yes, I'm going to be there.
Good. Looking forward.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent note on which to end. Thank you very much from Globespan 24x7. We'll see you again next time. Have a good night,